شيخ يلا
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين، والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين نبينا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. My brothers and sisters in Islam, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. I welcome you all in this session, which is the 8th class in the series of classes entitled The Fiqh of Taharah. Alhamdulillah, Allah's blessing that we are embarked on this mission of seeking Islamic knowledge. It's a blessed journey. I ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to make it full of barakah and full of knowledge. Because we need to remember that we're not here only seeking barakah. We're not here only seeking barakah, we are here to seek knowledge. And subhanAllah, as believers, when we say that we believe, or one of the pillars of faith is that we believe in 6 pillars of faith: believing in Allah, His books, His messengers, and the angels, and the messengers of Allah, and the last day, and the qadr, the good of it, and the evil of it. SubhanAllah, part of believing that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the all-wise, the all-knowledgeable, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala decided to send messengers to us. And part of our beliefs in the messengers of Allah and in the books of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that we have to believe that there has not been a nation on this earth except that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has sent to them messengers and sent to them books and made revelations. And especially in our nation, the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam has been through lots of challenges. The gates of jihad were opened, a lot of enmity and a lot of difficulties he's been through. The scholars of Islam been through a lot. We need to know, we need to believe that this is not for a vain purpose. You know, the attitude many people have these days, that Islamic knowledge is not a must. Meaning, I can do without. What's the big deal? What if I don't have Islamic knowledge? You know, what am I going to miss out on? You know, having this attitude is equivalent as believing that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala did all these sort of things. He created the 7 heavens and earth. He created the angels. He created messengers. He sent down angels to come down to prophets of Allah, and these prophets of Allah to come with miracles and send them to them. All that with no purpose. You know, a person who has no desire to seek Islamic knowledge, basically what they are saying, in other words, that all of that was unneeded. We could figure things out on our own minds. So a person who truly believes in the books of Allah, that article of faith, the messengers of Allah, the angels of Allah, what this also means that you should be keen to seek Islamic knowledge. Not only that, you should also know that that Islamic knowledge, or that type of knowledge, is the type of knowledge that you can never arrive at using your own common sense or your intelligence. If that was the case, Allah would not have sent messengers. This is knowledge that we are desperate for, and that is the reason why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala made sure He sent this. I begin today's session with this introduction because there has been a small incident that I've come across. One parent came to me one day with his daughter. She was 17, 18 years old. For me to read Quran on her and to also speak to her about certain things that are happening to her mind. Shaitan is bombarding her with negative thoughts, and she's been finding it very difficult even to believe that she's Muslim. She was so vulnerable that the shaitan would actually throw negative thoughts about Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, wiswas, and she cannot differentiate between what's hers and what's the shaitan. And when the shaitan says certain things, she doesn't know how to respond to them in her mind. There has been a time where she felt that it's probably best for her to die. This is a real story that happened to me. I've seen this sister and I've dealt with her. She felt that she is probably better off dying. And the way she thought about it, that at the moment, at least I have my faith in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But if I continue living, and if I continue receiving these negative thoughts, which I cannot fight back from, and the fact that they occur to my mind, maybe this is going to make me, in a short period of time, renounce my religion. So let me better off die now as a Muslim before I die a month later as a non-Muslim. This sister attends my classes in my local masjid on a weekly basis for months, if not years. And then when she came for the counseling session, for me to give her advice and correct her misconceptions, at the end of it, I said to her, sister, did I tell you here in this session anything that I have not told in the classes? She said no. Everything I said in the session, which made her feel good and she felt better, everything was said in the classes. But then she told me something that I would like to convey to you. She said that for some reason, when she comes to the classes, she is disconnected from the classes. She said that I will be sitting down, doodling, writing things, drawing flowers and roses and faces, etc. And I will not be paying attention. She says, I felt that this is theoretical knowledge that is not applicable to the real life. And because of that, I didn't feel motivated that I should know about this. And subhanAllah, not a long period passed before she was actually in need for that knowledge that she has been receiving for a long period of time. Only because she was sitting there, not believing that what she's listening to is something critical. And that is why Allah sent down angels and sent down prophets and sent them to us with miracles, because this knowledge, believe it or not, even if you don't perceive it now, a day will come in your life where you will see the benefit of this knowledge. Or even more, other knowledge that you are, inshallah, continuing to, if you continue on this path, you will receive other knowledge for which this knowledge is the foundation. If you don't have this, you won't be able to acquire further knowledge. I say this because sometimes I feel, or even this sister, before I move on, I said to her, then why were you attending the classes? If you weren't listening, if you weren't taking notes, if you weren't paying attention, why were you taking the classes? She said, I thought that since I'm a practicing sister, that's what practicing people do. It goes with the territory. You know, if I'm practicing, the practicing people go to classes. So I end up going so that I can fit in, so I can be part of that crowd, the crowd of practicing people, but not really believing that this is critical knowledge. We practice Islam because we believe Islam is a way of life. And because we believe Islam is a way of life, we feel the necessity, the desperation we have to receive the Islamic knowledge that Islam came with. Right? So basically, I say this because at times I think that most of the youth are vulnerable to these ideas. You know, sometimes you would like to be practicing and you would like to be among certain practicing brothers and sisters, and you want to fit in. If practicing people do come to the class, alhamdulillah, their influence will be to pull you in the class. But then I can see sometimes people are not paying attention. And I'm telling you, by Allah, all of you are, or a lot of you are in the ages of my daughter and my son, who are at university level now, alhamdulillah. But I'm telling you, 5 years from now, 10 years maximum from now, you will be kicking yourself, regretting why you haven't focused when you had the time to.
One thing regarding this stuff also, Sheikh, they have very good chance for the student. We give this classes during the uni life, because after they graduate, they will go to the job life.
That's exactly what I'm talking about here. You might think that today you are busy, tomorrow you'll be less busy. Reality is, tomorrow is always harder. Tomorrow you will have less opportunities than you have today. If you cannot make it today, then definitely tomorrow the mission will become twice as hard. So you need to make sure that you get engaged. You are already here, make the most of it. Right? And also we are discussing an issue that is known especially amongst non-Arabic speakers, even some Arabic speakers. We have seen examples of so many people who have this problem of wiswas. Wiswas, you know, the shaitan, there's some hadith came, not authentic, but they actually stated a name for a jinn, a particular jinn called Al-Walhan, that is specialized for confusing people about salat and about Taharah particularly. Right? So the one that is responsible for Taharah, for Salat, is called Khanzab or Khinzab. And the one that is responsible for Taharah is called Al-Walhan. Khinzab came in an authentic narration. The name Al-Walhan didn't come in an authentic narration. But the point is, there is a shaitan, and we can see it in real life. Even if we haven't known the name of this particular jinn, I am telling you, I have seen certain individuals who could spend half an hour at least in the bathroom with their hands running under the tap and not believing that they have actually washed their hands. Half an hour under the tap, the water is running, they're just going like this. Every time they finish, they think that they haven't done it properly. The shaitan says, you haven't done it properly. And they watch again and again, half an hour, only taking wudu. Their situation became very bad that they got to a point where they needed somebody to watch them. Because no matter how many times they did it, they will never believe themselves. The shaitan can just throw one idea in their heads and then they will start again. All of that because of confusions. They are not sure what is. Certain things are sunnah and you shouldn't be stressed about it. They stress themselves about everything they know. And also sometimes they impose certain things that are not even from the deen upon themselves just to be in the safe side. So they put so much pressure on themselves that their minds start to falter. Their brain cannot cope with this no longer. Right? So if they had proper knowledge, they wouldn't have been in this messy situation. You know? I know a sister, subhanAllah, she started to pray. And every time she prays, she concludes her prayer, she starts again. She thinks that she must have missed one rak'ah, she must have missed this, she must have missed that. She keeps on praying and repeating. She doesn't know how many rak'ah she prayed. So she ended up asking her sister to stand and watch her how many rak'ah she does. Even when that happened, the sister told her that you prayed for rak'ah. She said, no, maybe you blinked. Maybe you looked away. Maybe you thought this. So when the person starts to go in that tunnel, the tunnel of wiswas, they will never see the end of it. It's a very difficult journey, wallahi alim. And the solution to that problem was what? To learn the deen right from the beginning and to understand what's an obligation. What are the few things in Islam that they have to be stressed about? Right? And I should also know what is optional, so that I don't have to stress about it too much. If I have the leisure of time, if I am comfortable, if I am relaxed, then I'll do them. But if things are too stressful for me, I need to know what can be dropped off the menu. You know, what I can be relieved from. And that is because of what? Because of this, the lack of Islamic knowledge. And then the person will come later on and say, I need to be treated from waswas. How do I get treated? You know, the problem is an accumulative problem. The problem that occurred from 10 years back. For 10 years, this person has been bombarded in their minds with whisperation from the shaitan due to the weaknesses of their non-Islamic knowledge. And now when you meet them all of a sudden, one day, how much can you teach them in one session? When you sit down with one person, how much knowledge can you give them in one session for them to feel better and to make corrections to their course? There's only so much you can give them then. It is an accumulative process, you know. And alhamdulillah, with Allah's grace, you came to these classes, you started to attend. Okay? You might as well make the most of it. Make sure that whatever you learn is in the head. Something you learn, done and dusted. Tomorrow, you move on to another type of knowledge. And subhanAllah, there are other areas in Islam that you have to learn. You need to learn about tafsir, you need to learn about Arabic, you need to learn about tawheed, you need to learn about aqidah, you know, seerah of the Prophet ﷺ. All these areas, when are you going to learn them? If every time you catch Islamic knowledge, I take it lightly and say, tomorrow I'll go over it again. Tomorrow I'll go over it again. Then when are you going to get the time to learn the other critical things that are just as critical? You know? Think about Arabic. You know where you stand now in terms of Arabic, and the fact that you need to learn Islamic Arabic language for you to be able to say to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, I read your message, you sent me a message, and I read it and I understood it. You know? So we are in a very critical situation. We need to make sure that whatever we get ourselves involved with in terms of Islamic knowledge, we make sure that this is the first time and the last time I would ever need to get involved with this knowledge. Tomorrow is a day for another type of knowledge, or a following episode, or a following session, or a following chapter in a book, or something like this. But don't attend the session half-heartedly. You know, don't accept to be mediocre. especially in the area of fiqh. You know, a lot of, I noticed a lot of what is said in the beginning of the session sometimes can be very easy and very simple, you know, and I can see sometimes people are a little bit relaxed about it. But this is the nature of fiqh. The ulama, when they organize their material, like in a book or something, they will give you the basics and the foundations at the beginning. If you don't pay if you don't pay attention to them, halfway through the chapter or towards the end of the chapter, you'll find that they will be presenting you with ideas that are quite complex to understand. If you didn't understand the basic ones, which were presented at the beginning of the chapter or at the beginning of the session, you will be puzzled at the end of it. Right? Nothing is minor. And subhanAllah, only if we appreciate the ulama of Islam and how much work they did to present Islamic knowledge to us, you will understand, subhanAllah, how valuable their advice is and how much effort they did. These are individuals who have dedicated their lives, their entire life. They did nothing other than learn and teach Islamic knowledge. Some of them, they didn't even have the time to get married and have children and have family. Right? So we think that now when we have their knowledge, we think it's something lightly that we can discount it or take it easy. Wallahi, it's not like this. So take them very seriously. I say this because I remember also in the previous session, certain ideas were presented at the beginning of the class. They were easy and everybody was comfortable with them. But towards the end, people got puzzled. You know, when we studied al-mas'a al-khufayn, wiping over the socks or the khuf. Right? This is how things are going to be all the time. If you don't pay attention at the beginning, right, you will be confused at the end. And the worst outcome of this as well is for you to have this negative impact or a negative impression, thinking that Islamic knowledge is solid, and maybe you're not cut for Islamic knowledge. You're not the type of person who is made for Islamic knowledge. So that will put you off. When the reality is, it's nothing to do with whether you are cut for Islamic knowledge or not, whether you are smart or enough for it or not, whether it is complicated or not. It's not. It's only to do with the fact that when you sat in the class or when you read the book, you read it half-heartedly. You weren't focused. But otherwise, it's easy. It's very easy to understand if you follow up. So I urge you to say, Alhamdulillah, I've begun this series of classes today. I'm going to learn about the Taharah. Another 3 or 4 sessions, I'll be done with the Taharah. After that, I should never need to go back to the Taharah. Then I will be looking at Salat, for example. Then I will be looking at Tawheed. Then I will be looking at... But if at the end of the chapter of Taharah, somebody asks you a question and you're still so puzzled, you don't know how to answer, subhanAllah, it was a waste of your time. Waste of time, waste of energy. And this is a life that you only have to live once. You know, at the end of it, you will never be allowed to go back again and say, let me do it again. A day that is gone will never come back. So make sure that you make the most of it and you benefit from these classes. And this applies to all other classes as well. Anything you do it willingly. You know, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has a rule in Islam. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, إِنَّ اللَّهَ يَأْمُرُ بِالْعَدْلِ وَالْإِحْسَانِ. Al-'adl wal-ihsan. Allah commands or instructs His creation for 2 important words, al-'adl and al-ihsan. Adl is the opposite of dhulm. Adl means placing the right thing at the right place. And ihsan means perfecting whatever you do in that department. That's subhanAllah. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is saying, this heart of yours, place it in the right place. Because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave you so many blessings in your life. The biggest of all blessings is your heart. Apply it to one area, put it in the right place. Don't put it in dunya, because your heart is meant to work towards akhirah. That's what your heart is meant to be for. If you place it in dunya, that is dhulm. That's a wrongdoing. Placing something in the wrong place. What's al-'adl? Placing the heart where it should be placed. Seeking the pleasure of Allah, seeking Islamic knowledge, so that is the right place for it. But while you are here, you also need to have what? Ihsan. Whatever you do, perfect it. You know, apply your mind and your heart full-heartedly. Exert all your effort, and this is what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala loves. Inna Allah yuhibbul muslimin. So I feel this is really important, because I don't want you to conclude this by yourself 5 years from now or 10 years from now, when you are loaded with other responsibilities, work, family, wife, husbands, children, and then you will say, subhanAllah, You know, and speak to families around you, people who have already been in that position that I'm describing here, family and children and spouses. Ask them how much time do they have to pray, let alone to seek Islamic knowledge. A lot of them, they don't even have, very good brothers and sisters, they don't even have time to pray the 12 rak'ah. You know the 12 rak'ah optional prayers in the day? They don't even have time for that. Why? Because they're too busy. When they do pray, they only have time, hardly enough time, to pray the fard. Quickly, and go and catch up with this and catch up with that, and they can hardly make it as well. Right? Now is the best time. Tomorrow is always less of an opportunity for you to do whatever you want to do today. You do it today, inshallah. طيب. In the previous session, we concluded المسح على الجوارب.
This is session 10.
Huh?
Session 10.
Is it 10? I think it's 9. This is session 9. In the previous class, we concluded al-masah ala al-khuffayn and the issues around it. Let me ask you one question to gauge your understanding of it. Okay? Say, for example, a person comes to you and says, I started to do al-masah al-khuffayn a year ago. That's when I learned about it. But I misunderstood it. I thought that I just have to put the socks on and I can wipe on it. I never wore my socks whilst in a state of Taharah. Remember, this was one of the conditions is for you to have it when a state of Taharah. After you take wudu, then you put the socks on and then you can wipe over it afterwards. Huh? So somebody learned about al-masah al-khuffayn, wiping over the socks, and he wasn't paying attention, or she wasn't paying attention. So they end up for a whole year wiping over the socks, but without taking wudu for it, before it. And they ask you, what shall I do? You attended the Taharah series at Cornell. What would you answer them? What should they do?
Start like a new beginning now, you know.
Mm-hmm.
And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will give you for what you did it unknown, you didn't know about it.
Mm-hmm.
You didn't have the knowledge.
Okay, anybody else? Yes. Speak up, sister.
It will be pardoned for it, but from now on, he's
Okay. Anybody else? Like the case with praying without wudu. Anyone that prays without wudu, i.e. without tahara, regardless of what is missing in that tahara, if you are not in a valid Islamic state of tahara, then you have to go back and do those prayers. You know, اللجنة الدائمة للإفتاء, the council of the committee of fatwa in Saudi Arabia, this is the fatwa they will give. You know, that you have to go back and redo all these prayers. So for a whole year, if you did not perform the wudu properly, then the salawat of all these prayers is invalid, and you have to make it.
Because he doesn't.
And also, a follow-up question to that would be, what shall I do with my, I don't even know the numbers. Was it really 6 months, 8 months, 9 months? Was it a year and a half? I don't even know how many days have I done it. And which prayers I was doing it sometimes and sometimes not. The ulama, they say you should estimate. You should estimate and make a rough estimation and go by that. This is just to show you, subhanAllah, what happens when one does not pay attention. Umar al-Khattab radiallahu anhu, he says in one hadith, he says, إِنَّ الرَّجُلَ لَا يَشِيبُ عَارِضَاهُ فِي الْإِسْلَامِ وَلَمْ تُقْبَلْ لَهُ صَلَاةٌ. A man, with his hair will turn grey whilst a Muslim, whilst in Islam, and none of his salawat has been accepted for him. For this type of knowledge, this type of mistakes in Islamic knowledge. Okay? There's another example to show you, subhanAllah, how critical this thing is. طيب. Yes, sir.
So what about the state of Jahiliyyah?
If you were not, we discussed this when we spoke about the conditions of ibadah in general. We said that if you were not committed to Islam at all, then that's it. When the minute you come to Islam, right, then you have a new page. But for a person who was committed and who was actually a Muslim, and he was doing things but wrong, then he has to make corrections.
Yes.
You see the difference?
Yeah. Makes sense as well.
Another mas'ala that we have missed out on the previous class is if somebody was a traveler and then he arrives at his hometown, or somebody who was in his hometown and he was wiping up with socks and then he traveled. Right? So somebody, you know, a settler, he has 24 hours to wipe over his socks, and a traveler has 72 hours. So now if you change the state, what happens? We haven't discussed that, and it could happen to anyone. Right? If you are a settler and then a few hours are still remaining from your masih time, and then you travel, immediately that would be extended for 72 hours. So basically you used 18 hours, say, from the previous, from the first 24 hours, then you continue from that basically.
Will be another 40,
Yeah.
72.
Yeah, so you add up whatever you need to add up to complete the 72, because effectively you became a traveler, and therefore you are entitled for the concessions for a traveler. And vice versa, if somebody was a traveler and then they came into the city, what they should do, if they have already used their 24 hours, then they should no longer wipe on the socks. Okay? But if they have wiped, if they have started their wiping over the socks for, say, for example, for 10 hours, and then they arrived at the city, right, they should then consider how many hours are left for them? 14 hours. Right? That's how it should work out. طيب. Also, another area that is related to wudu, which is also relevant to our lives, and you will see, subhanAllah, how relevant it is. We will discuss it, inshallah. Wiping over al-jaba'ir. What is called wiping over al-masah al-jaba'ir. Right? Wiping over dressings and casts that one has around their broken limbs or broken skin, when they have like bandages and wraps around for protection, or cast if they have a broken leg or a broken arm. These are called jaba'ir. Right? They are called jaba'ir. We should know that there are evidences or there are narrations. For example, concerning wiping over al-jaba'ir, there's a hadith recorded or narrated by Jabir radiallahu anhu. He narrates that we one time, this is a known hadith that will come so many times in so many different aspects of Islamic knowledge. It will serve you in aqidah, it will serve you somehow in usul al-fiqh, it will serve you somehow in fiqh. Right? So try to understand it and try to remember it. He says, we went out on a journey. Right? And it seems like this journey was an expedition or a battle. He said, we went out and one man amongst us, he was hit by a stone. Right? أصابه حجر فشج رأسه. A man was hit, one of the companions was hit with a stone, and it cracked his skull open. And when they spent the night, this man had a wet dream. A wet dream in which a person ejaculates. So he becomes in a state of impurity, and he used to have ghusl. He asked his companions, this man, he said to them, it was a cold night as well, so he feared for himself. He said, do I have any concession on taking tayammum? So they said to him, as long as we have water, why should you use dust or tayammum? Water is available. And as you will see, inshallah, when we discuss tayammum, these people weren't aware that a person is able to use tayammum, dust, if there is no water, or if this person is incapable of using the water. Right? You are unable to use the water, say for example, because you are sick, you have some sick condition, the skin condition that prevents you from using water, or you are ill and it's very cold. This sort of circumstances, you can say that you have water, but you are considered as though you don't have water. So therefore, you will have the concession of using tayammum. But these people, his friends or his companions, did not know about this. So they said to him, you have no concession. How could you use dust when there is water available? So he ended up showering. He had a ghusl and he died as a result of it. When they came to the Prophet ﷺ, they said to the Prophet ﷺ, what happened? And he said, قَتَلُوهُ قَتَلَهُمُ اللَّهُ. He said, they have killed him, may Allah kill them. They have killed him, may Allah kill them. This is again, it's a word not intended literally, but it's a word of scolding and reprimanding a person. You know, like when they say ثَكِّلَتْكَ أُمُّكَ in the Arab language, they will say ثَكِّلَتْكَ أُمُّكَ means may your mother lose you. May you die and your mother lose you and weep over you. That's what it means, literally. But the Arabs, they used to say such words, and the Prophet ﷺ used it at some point, but he did not mean it literally. He meant to reprimand the person or scold them or draw their attention. You know, when he said to Mu'adh, ثَكِّلَتْكَ أُمُّكَ يَا Mu'adh. He told Mu'adh that he loves him immensely. But he used that word with him to draw his attention to what he's going to tell him afterwards. So likewise here, the Prophet ﷺ, he says, قَتَلُوهُ قَتَلَهُمُ اللَّهُ. They killed him, may Allah kill them. And what he intended with that, to reprimand them. And because he says to them, he repeated 3 times, he said, أَلَا سَأَلُوا إِن لَمْ يَعْلَمُوا. Should they not ask when they did not know? Why should they make their own judgment and their own fatwa for themselves like this? He says, فَإِنَّمَا شِفَاءُ الْعِيِّ السُّؤَالِ. For verily, the cure to ignorance is asking somebody else. And this is sometimes an attitude that many people have. They just don't know how to say, I don't know. They just can't say it. And they will say it, in my mind, to my logic, as far as I'm concerned, and they will just give a fatwa. And they will say, Allah knows best. But you've already given a fatwa. You've already done a lot of damage. These people, the Prophet ﷺ, cursed them like this, and he made this statement against them to show you how serious this is. He said that in terms of sin, they are as though they have killed this person. Yes, they will not be called to pay for ransom or something like this, or to be killed as they killed him. But in terms of sin, some ulama they say, in terms of sin, they have sinned equal to killing the person. And it's only because they couldn't say I don't know when they didn't know. Many people have this problem. And this is probably to do with what we said at the beginning of the session, because they take Islamic knowledge as something minor, something easy. We can figure it out with common sense. I don't have to go and ask a sheikh. I'll probably make a guess, and this guess will probably be right. A lot of people have this problem. And how much damage they cause without knowing is subhanAllah, it's amazing. So the Prophet ﷺ, he said, أَلَا سَأَلُوا إِذْ لَمْ يَعْلَمُوا فَإِنَّمَا شِفَاءُ عِيِّ السُّؤَالِ. Should they not ask when they did not know? For the cure of sickness, the sickness of ignorance, is asking somebody else. And then he said, إِنَّمَا كَانَ يَكْفِيهِ. It would have sufficed him. أَنْ يَتَيَمَّمْ. Now listen up. Now this is the part that's relevant to our fiqh aspect. He said it would have been sufficient for him to do first tayammum وَيَعْصِرَ أَوْ يَعْصِبَ, meaning to wrap his head where the wound is with some form of wrapping or dressing. ثُمَّ يَمْسَحَ عَلَيْهَا, and then he would wipe over that part of the head, and he would wash the rest of the body. Right? So he's saying that for the ghusl, what this man needed, he needed to do tayammum first, and then after that wrap his head with this dressing, and then do masih over it, and then after that do the ghusl on the remainder of the body. Did you follow this sequence? So basically this hadith explicitly mentions what? Al-masih. Masih over something that you have a bandage or a dressing like this. That should be evidence. Right? But the ulama, they said this hadith came from a weak narration. This hadith came from a weak narration. What do we mean by this? Anyone? Weak narration. ضعيف. When we say ضعيف, when the ulama they say this is a weak hadith, what do they mean by this? The sanad is weak, or the chain of narration. Anybody can elaborate on this? How is it weak? Yes.
You can't use it mainly for proving something, but you can use it like to.
No. What I'm saying is that when we say a chain of narration is weak, what does that mean, sister?
Does it mean like the people who, like there's different, what's it called? Like the people who narrated are not trustworthy?
Yeah, not all of them, but there is somebody, at least there's one person whose narration is not reliable, either because he is his memory wasn't strong, or he doesn't narrate accurately, or sometimes you find people who are liars sometimes, right? So those who are trustworthy, they don't lie, but they are not reliable in their memorization. They forget quickly, and they don't narrate the hadith word for word. They narrate it by meaning instead of by word, and when they do that, they are relaxed on the way they make up for the words. So this sort of individual will become unreliable, right? But we have two categories of people that are unreliable: those who lie and fabricate things, and we have those who do not lie, but they are unreliable in their memory or in their relation of the hadith. So this type of people, the people who are unreliable to do with memory and they have no issues with their integrity, this kind of people, their narration will become weak. But if we have other people whose integrity is questionable, then it's not weak. It will be very weak. Very weak. If you have a person in the chain of narrators who could potentially lie, right? Are we going to put them in equal standing, both of them? No. The first category, those who have problems with their memory or their accuracy, they will be called a weak person, right? Or a weak, and therefore any narration in which this person exists, it will be called a weak narration, right? But if a chain of narration has a person who is a liar, or a person who fabricates hadith, right? Then his narration will become what? Very weak, very weak. Now the ulama have this issue. They say if we have various ahadith, right, in the same meaning, all the chain of narrators, the different chain of narrators from which we have learned this hadith, all of them are weak. Not very weak, weak. What will happen then? They will say, since we have the same text being relayed by so many different people, it is very unlikely, or what they say, that it is very likely that the hadith is reliable, because we have so many different ways in which this hadith has been narrated, and because of that it becomes reliable, right? So they say this is hasanun li ghayri. This is reliable not in itself, but for the fact that there is other narrations present, right? Did you catch this idea?
Yeah.
Or did you switch off? Who switched off? Because this is one of the tricks of the shaitan. You know, when you get a little bit of complication, the shaitan says, I know, let this one go. Wait for the following one, it's probably easier. You know? Don't do that. Put your hands up and say, can you see it again? And I'm happy to repeat things. Right? Like I said to you, the shaitan tells you this is too much for you to understand. Let it go and check the following one. But the following one will be based on you understanding this one. If you haven't understood it, it will become a problem. Sometimes you have people too shy to ask. They say, I'm going to embarrass myself, you know, I'm going to look like idiots, and people are going to laugh at me. And you will be surprised that maybe there are other people who are in exactly the same shoes, but nobody had the courage to ask. Right? So do ask.
A bit noisy outside, so could you just repeat the last part?
Okay, yes, it is actually noisy. Because like I said to you, this discussion, in the near future, if you don't know this discussion, you will not be able to enhance your Islamic knowledge. You will always become in this level of knowledge, whereby you rely on other people to explain to you this and explain to you that. Well, how about you get this knowledge and keep on advancing yourself until you get to a point where you can find the knowledge for yourself. And this is what I'm giving you now. Right? My purpose behind this is to prepare you to become in that station, and also to make you appreciate how much effort the ulama are putting. Right? So we said, imagine there is a text of hadith, right? The matan they call it. And this hadith came from different chain of narrators. Do you understand what chain of narrators means? Right? The ulama of hadith, they started to record the hadith in the 2nd century, 2nd to 3rd century. So usually, between somebody like al-Bukhari, for example, Bukhari is one of the people who record the hadith, Muslim, right? Between him and the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, there will probably be 4 or 5 people, sometimes maybe 3, right? Depending on how high the sanad is, right? So basically, there will be how many people? 3 or 4, right? Now, if they want to check whether this hadith is something that is reliable or not, what do they do? Sisters, what do they do if they want to check this hadith is reliable or not? They check the names of the individuals who narrated it. For example, somebody will say, I heard it from such so and so. And so says that I heard it from so and so. And so said I heard it from so and so. And then he said I heard it from the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Obviously, there is no question about the reliability of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and there is no question about the reliability of the Sahaba. What they need to check is anybody that comes after the Sahaba, the Tabi'een, the following of the Tabi'een, and so on and so forth. Right? And therefore, if we have in this chain of narrators, if we have them all reliable, meaning their integrity is not questioned, it's not questionable, and their memorization and their accuracy in relating the knowledge is very good, then they will say this is reliable hadith. This is, they say, this is sahih, sound, hasan. Right? In the other hand, sometimes when they look at the chain of narrators, they will find the person unreliable. At least one person. If one person is unreliable, they say this chain of narrators is unreliable. Right? But this lack of reliability can stem from one of 2 reasons. Either because of the person lacking integrity. And what I mean by that is somebody who is known to have no fear of Allah, they could lie, they could fabricate things. This is a serious issue. And on the other hand, we have somebody who would never lie, but sometimes they forget. Right? They are equally, both of them are equally, they are unreliable, but not in equal footing. Right? The person who would not lie, but is not good with memory, his narration will become what? Weak. Right? And the person that is unreliable, but his integrity is questioned, his narration will become very weak. And the reason why I'm saying this, because the ulama, they sometimes would collect a hadith, certain chain of narrators, if they are all revolving around the same hadith, and all of them are weak, they would class them as strengthening one another, and they will stand out to be a reliable hadith. Right? But if these hadith are all of them unreliable to a very weak classification, then it doesn't matter how many of them you have. They will never lift them up to Hasan li-ghayrihi. Does that make sense? Right? They will be totally unreliable. So now this hadith we have, right? This hadith we have here is a hadith that is narrated by a very weak chain of narrators. Very weak chain of narrators. So some ulama who have missed out on this, they took all these very weak chain of narrators, put them together, and they said this hadith is what? Reliable. But is it? It's not reliable. So now you understand one reason for why certain scholars, or some scholars, sometimes they will differ in opinion. Right? That's one of the reasons why they differ. One hadith will become as reliable according to one scholar, and according to another scholar, it will be unreliable. Right? So now what you need to do, you will need, when you are equipped with this form of knowledge that I'm giving you now, you will be able to look at the chain of narrators and see what exactly happened there. Do we have a very weak narration, or do we have a weak narration? And when the ulama, they differ, and they tell you, my opinion about this hadith, that it is hasan li ghayri, it is reliable for the collection of the hadith, or it is totally unreliable, and they give you their reasons, it will make sense to you now. Right? Understanding this, sometimes it can be a matter of, for example, say the ulama have differed concerning a serious issue like whether a person is divorced or not. A couple, they went through divorce, one time, second time, and the third time. Now the third time is going to be that's it, and there are kids involved. Now you need to know which of the two opinions is valid? Is it the opinion that says the divorce is gone and it's completely no chance for them to come back to each other, they have to go and marry different people? Or the other opinion that says this divorce is still valid? You will want to know then. Now you might not have anything at hand that is troubling you or causing you difficulties in your life, and that's why you feel this discussion is irrelevant. But you really need to understand how sometimes to weigh the opinions of the scholars to decide for yourself which one is more reliable. Because sometimes a person's life could be on the stake, a person's marriage can be on stake, or somebody's investment can be on stake. Right? So sometimes you'll find yourself unreliable. You go to one person, the person tells you it's halal. You go to another person, the person tells you it's haram. What do you do? What do you do? How do you go about this? So if every time something like this is discussed in front of you and you just switch off, then you will remain in this position for the rest of your life. You will never be content and happy and fully understanding things. Right? Put your mind into it, and anything you put your mind into it, you will figure it out. Just put your mind into it. So this hadith is unreliable. Right? There is another hadith that is hasan or reliable, but it did not speak about the masih on the jabir. It did not. It only spoke up to qataluhu qatalahumullah, and then the Prophet ﷺ said, قد جعل الله الصعيد طهورا. The Prophet ﷺ said, Allah made the tayammum a means for purifying oneself. That's all the other narration said. But that other narration is reliable. So now, this part of the hadith, the ulama, they say, when we put these two together, we can say that part of the hadith is reliable. We can rely on it, we can build on it. Right? But the other part where the masih is mentioned, we're not going to take that on board. Right? There's also another hadith concerning wiping over bandages and casts, which is called al-jabira. There's another hadith that reports that Ali radiallahu anhu, he says, I broke one of my two zins. You know the two bones in the arm? You know every arm has two bones? He says, I broke one of them. And then the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, obviously he had jabira. In the past they used to have like sticks, wood sticks, and then they would rub them together with like some form of clothing or whatever. So he said that I had broken my zind, my arm. So the Prophet ﷺ commanded me to wipe on it. That's another hadith. But this hadith is agreed upon among the scholars of hadith that is unreliable. Okay? See how I emphasize scholars of hadith. Meaning, if you are talking to a scholar of fiqh who has no knowledge of hadith, he will probably tell you a ruling based on a hadith that is weak or unreliable, but without knowing. For example, we have an Imam al-Nawawi here who said, اتفق الحفاظ على ضعف هذا الحديث. Imam al-Nawawi, one of the few scholars of Islam who are well versed in both areas, fiqh and hadith. That's why he was one of the outstanding scholars of Islam. So this hadith is unreliable. So now what we have a situation whereby in the issue of al-masih al-jabira, there is no hadith that is reliable at all. There is no hadith that is reliable at all. So how should we deal with this situation? We'll stop here for Salat al-Maghrib and we will continue after the Salat, inshallah. سبحانك اللهم وبحمدك نشهد ان لا اله الا انت نستغفرك ونتوب اليك.